A 3, 2, 1. Jesseth of Jail's Head, Book 1, Bloodkin, by Kathy Ashford, Chapter 29. Later, a long time later, I was stretched out on the couch with Thalic's head resting on my chest. The candles had burnt themselves out and the globes had faded to darkness. As we had been forbidden to use the fire, it was pretty chilly in the hut, and we had reluctantly pulled our robes back on. The Queen was asleep, her breathing deep and regular as I cuddled her, one hand absently stroking her hair. I thought about Charlie, my friends, and how this day had suddenly gone so hideously wrong. But I could only feel Thalic's optimism that everything was going to be okay as I held the wondrous woman in my arms. It must have been getting close to dawn, because I could hear the birds outside in the forest, beginning to sing in the new day. It was still completely dark outside, though. Anna's shield only kept the light from escaping. I heard a twig crack outside the cottage and stiffened. Anna and Charlie were here, but my relief was tinged with a kind of regret. Their arrival meant that I would have to wake the Queen and leave this place that had seen the consummation of months' worth of growing feelings. I realized that I never, ever wanted her to be anywhere else but right beside me. Another twig snapped, and I thought about getting up to let them in when I heard some muttering in Neathi. The voice was male, rough and terse, and certainly not Anna or Charlie. I froze, my hand still on Thalic's hair, as I heard 4 sets of footsteps work their way round to the back of the house. Shit. Hey, beautiful, shh, wake up, I whispered at Thalic, shaking her shoulders slightly. She grumbled and buried her face in my chest, unwilling to wake. Come on, Thale. My shaking grew increasingly frantic as I heard attempts to open the back door. What? She lifted her head and blinked at me sleepily. There's someone here, I whispered. Her eyes grew round as she heard the muttered swearing from out the back, and she sat up quickly. Can we go out the front? I shook my head. If there were 4 men out the back, they would have left at least one to keep lookout at the front of the cottage. You said this was it? The rough voice asked in human. Yes, sir. I mean, they ran back the way they came, but when I first saw them, they were heading this way. There's naught but forest further in, so unless they're camping out somewhere, this is the place. They used magic on me, you know. The other voice, slightly petulant now, I realised as belonging to the forester. Effing bastard! But who were the others with them, and why were they looking for us? And why the hell were they speaking Neathi? Quick, I whispered to Thalic and grabbed her hand, tugging her off the couch. There was a little gap in the corner where the 2 couches met. We stuffed ourselves in there, and I covered us with a visibility shield just as the back door flew open with a mighty crash as one of the men kicked it hard. There's no one here, the first voice, which I guess belonged to the leader, sounded testy. But they must be, the forester stammered. The leader barked an order to one of the other men. Hey, wait, you said... The forester's words ended abruptly with a sickening crunch of something hard breaking his skull. I heard him being dragged out the back door, then his assailant walked back inside, brushing his hands. I could see the 3 men now, having rounded the corner from the kitchen. All of them were dressed in black robes, their hoods up. The tallest one carried a pocket globe in front of him and swept the light around the room. I held my breath as it passed over our corner, and I felt Thalic do the same. The leader stepped across the creaky floor until I could see the bottom of his robe, so close I could have reached out and touched it. He bent down and picked up the bottle of brandy, muttering something in Neathi to the others, who laughed quietly before he silenced them with a gesture. He examined the bottle and set it down on a table. One of the others pointed out the candelabra, and the leader sniffed the air and nodded. Shit, it was pretty obvious that someone had been in here recently. The tall one made another slow tour of the room, then looked at the others and shrugged. He walked past them and out the back door. The others followed more slowly, the last one scanning the room with his eyes again before heading to the door. I let out a huge sigh of relief, which turned out to be a mistake. because as I breathed in gratefully, I felt the years of accumulated dust in the corner being sucked into my mouth. I couldn't help it. I cleared my throat as quietly as I could, but that was enough. The last man almost to the door swung around. "Josefcia," he called to the leader, and he walked unerringly around the corner. "So you are hiding in here somewhere, little He was interrupted by a surprised scream from outside that was quickly cut off, and I heard a body thumping to the ground. The leader barked some quick commands, then disappeared out the back door, as the other two raced to the front and easily pulled open the door from the inside. One of them froze for a second, then shook it off, launching himself outside with a furious yell. The other ducked to the side of the door, and quickly poked his head out before pulling it back inside. I heard a familiar voice yelp in pain. "Charlie! The bastard was attacking Charlie!" The other man outside let out a shriek of surprise that finished with a disturbing gurgle, and then he was silent. "I've got your queen!" the man still inside yelled. "Don't try anything or I'll kill her!" Thaalik shook behind me. No way! There was no effing way! I squished her further back, putting up a new visibility shield around the corner. Then, maintaining my own invisibility, I stood up slowly. "If you give her to me, I will not harm you," Anna called through the door. I heard a groan from outside that sounded like Charlie in pain. "What had the bastard done to him?" The attacker sneered. "Bullshit! I know who you are, little bitch." He stuck his head round the door for a second, and I heard Anna grunt with anger. Shit! I had to do something. Invisible, I stepped over the arm of the couch silently and crept towards the man. I chanced to look out the open front door and saw two men lying motionless, and Charlie fallen to his knees, Anna standing behind him. I reached deep inside and gathered all the Hjavan I could, then thrust it in the air surrounding the man, freezing it and him in place. His eyes bulged with surprise, and for a couple of seconds it held. "Jesseth, no!" screamed Charlie from outside, and I realized with horror I had let my visibility shield slip, just as the man shook and laughed. "Stupid prick!" he yelled, and suddenly I was the one who couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He laughed as I tried to fix the air with my Hjavan, but it wouldn't move, wouldn't change. The man unsheathed a knife and swept behind me, holding it to my throat. "I've got your queen, and now this precious boy as well," he shouted outside. I was almost out of oxygen and my lungs began to ache. I could feel the knife at my throat pressing down with a sharp blade. Outside, Anna gave the slightest twitch of her head. I could feel the intensity of her stare from outside. The man laughed again, loud and mirthless in my ear. "What are you going to do now, little bit?" "Jesseth, get down!" Anna screamed and flung her hands out towards us, the physical action concentrating the force of her Hjavan. I felt the shield dissolve, and the last thing I heard was a strange whine of disbelief from the man holding me. Then everything went black, and I was unconscious before I hit the floor. End of chapter 29.